Welcome back. So, today we're going to chat about the 10 books that I've read so far in 2020. It's a little bit of a slow start to the reading year for me, but a good start nonetheless. One of my 2020 reading goals actually this year was to read a bunch more nonfiction, and I so far have been doing pretty well with that. I've read 5 fiction and 5 nonfiction books so far this year. As well, I believe 3 out of the 10 books I'm about to talk about were read via audiobook, and another one of my goals this year was to read more physical books, so I think I'm pretty happy with that. 3 out of 10 is an okay number for audiobooks, I think. Anyways, with a few of those basic stats out of the way, let's get into the 10 books that I've read so far in 2020. So first up, we've got a nonfiction book by James D. Watson, and this is The Double Helix. This is, again, a nonfiction book, and if you've heard of the famous duo Watson and Crick, you've probably heard of James D. Watson. Basically, Watson and Crick were the duo that are largely credited with understanding the structure of DNA. So we're getting into biology here, we're getting into genetics specifically. I personally really enjoyed this book. I read it because I wanted to get an understanding of like a first-hand account of what it was like to be a part of a major scientific discovery. And I did end up getting that out of this book, which I was really happy with. This isn't a super science-heavy book, so I would say that it's definitely good for anybody who has an interest in science history. And it was really, really fun to kind of get to know a first-hand account of some of these big names in science, at least according to this one person's account. Overall, I really enjoyed this book, and I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. Next up, we've got a very popular nonfiction book that I'm pretty sure was the winner of the nonfiction category for the Goodreads 2019 Choice Awards, and that was one of the reasons why I picked this book up, and that is Girl Stop Apologizing by Rachel Hollis. So again, this is a nonfiction read, very, very popular. Basically, this book was aimed at empowering women to follow their dreams and to do it unapologetically, to just kind of own your life and own your dreams, which I think is a fantastic message. I think that's awesome. Mostly in this book, the author is giving examples and little anecdotes and things from her own life to kind of show you that like you can do it, that it's not easy all the time, but you know, it's doable. And it was very, very honest, which I really, really enjoyed. There were quite a few things about this book though that I did not really like. For one, I found it pretty repetitive, and I found that although I liked the writing style in the beginning of the book, the repetition and just kind of the clarity of like the book having a really strong direction, I feel like that kind of waned as the book went on, and by the end of it I was pretty tired of reading it, to be quite frank. I do think that this will be the sort of first and last book I will pick up from this author. There's nothing huge that I really hated about it. It's just not my kind of book. But regardless, I think this book could do a lot of good for a lot of people, and if you're interested in picking it up, I highly recommend it. For me though, this was a solid 3 out of 5 stars. It was pretty neutral for a reading experience, maybe leaning a little bit more to the positive side. After that, it was time to finally pick up the first fiction book of the year, and what better book to choose than Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. If you guys have watched some of my previous videos, you may know that I am reading Harry Potter for the first time ever in my life, and I'm doing a little video series for each of the books. So if you guys are interested in kind of hearing my in-depth thoughts of my first time reading Harry Potter, definitely go and check out the videos in that series. I've got 2 videos up right now, and the third one will hopefully be coming to you guys in mid to end of April timeframe. Yeah, I'll try and link that somewhere. Anyways, getting on to what I actually thought about the book, a few of my thoughts. I much preferred this book to the first book. I thought that this book was a lot stronger in aspects of the writing. I thought that the plot and the characters were all much better realized, and overall it just had more direction and it was more succinct, I guess. Is that the right word? Maybe not, I don't know. But I just thought it was a much clearer vision, I guess, that was being put out on the page. This one it's still very evident that this book is for a younger audience, which was something that I said about the first book as well, because they are written for pretty much a middle grade audience, but it was less distracting in this one, so I think that had a lot to do with kind of just the writing maturing and stuff like that. Overall, I don't want to say too much because I do have the other videos that go into depth about this, but I really enjoyed this book. I enjoyed it more than the first, and I ended up giving it 4.25 out of 5 stars, where the first book had 4 out of 5 stars. blah, 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 blah. I'm like looking at my notes here and I'm like, what did I read after that? So after Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, I decided that it was time to dive into the first audiobook of the year, and the audiobook that I chose was The Genius in All of Us by David Shenk. This is a nonfiction book, and basically it goes over a lot of the misinformation that's out there about the link between genetics and intelligence, among a few other traits as well. This is a hugely approachable read. You do not have to have any kind of background in science or, prior understanding of science really to get into this book, and I highly recommend the audiobook as well because the narrator was very clear and concise, and it was great. It's really, really interesting. It sparked a huge interest in me to pursue other books of this kind about genetics and about heredity, so I'm actually enjoying one right now called She Has Her Mother's Laugh by Carl Zimmer. It's a big boy though, so it's going to take me a while to get through it, but I'm really enjoying this kind of vein of popular science books right now, so yeah. Anyways, highly recommend, really enjoying it, and I really enjoyed this book as well, and I ended up giving it 4.5 out of 5 stars. My little Switzerland bug. This next book I've got quite a lot of notes on, so please do forgive me for looking down so much. The next book that I read was a fiction book, and that was An Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson. So this was the first book that kind of kicked off this reading spree that I did in March, where I tried to consume a whole bunch of really short books to kind of like, 1, catch up on my Goodreads reading goal, and 2, just kind of get me back into reading, and I find shorter books are a lot more approachable, and that's why I did that. I really started off this year a little bit rough with my reading. I thought that I would read so much, and then I just read like nothing in January, February, so yeah, this was the book that I kind of tried to really kickstart reading a lot more, and it did help. Yeah, so An Enchantment of Ravens, Margaret Rogerson, let's get into it. This book is a fantasy book, fiction, obviously, and it's under 300 pages long, which totally super approachable and kind of rare. I find you don't find really short fantasy books all that often. Basically, this is a story where you've got kind of an us and them situation going on, where you've got the fair folk, or like the fae, and these fairy folk are very interested in human craft. So anything having to do with the creation of something. Things like, sewing of clothing, or painting of pictures, or creating of woodwork, that sort of thing. And we've got our main character, who is a human who has a real affinity for creating portraits. So she likes to do, I believe it's oil painting, of fairy folk. Spoiler alert, this is a little bit of a sort of friends to enemies to lovers type story. Basically, our main character gets involved with a fairy folk, or a fae folk, fair folk, I don't know what to call them, called the Autumn Prince, and he's a very powerful, mysterious member of the fair folk, and a whole bunch of different adventures ensue, basically. Overall, I did really like the concepts explored in this book. I liked the idea of the fair folk. I really liked that the fair folk had like these different courts that were based on the different seasons. So you had like the Autumn Prince character, and then you had like the court of the spring prince or whatever, and then you've got the winter, and then you've got the summer. I thought that was really, really interesting and really cool concept, but it could have been done so much better. Like, I was so frustrated reading this book because I was like, this is the coolest concept. I really, really like this, but it's just not being done super well. There was a ton of inconsistency, first of all, in the characters and their abilities from like one chapter to another, and that was extremely frustrating. And the motives of a lot of character were really confusing. Like, you kind of got like a haphazard explanation as to why someone was acting a certain way, or you just didn't get any explanation. It was like, that's just how they are. That's just their personality. And you're like, that doesn't make any sense. And also, in just like under 300 pages, I think it was 297 pages, you don't get enough page space to properly develop all of the really amazing ideas that were put down into this book. Like, I loved the skeleton of this book. It's the fleshing out, it was the meat of the story that I did not enjoy. Even the main characters, like, they could have been really good if they were just, like, if they just had a little more time to develop. I did want to ask if you guys know of any other books or book series or whatever out there, even movies and stuff about fairy folk or the little people or elves or anything like that. that has kind of a similar vibe to an Enchantment of Ravens, but maybe is done a little bit better or is a little bit more of an adult story than a YA story like this one, please do let me know. Let me know your recommendations, because I am now on the hunt. Overall, I ended up giving this story 3 out of 5 stars, so kind of neutral, leaning positive. Wasn't a bad book by any means, but it just really wasn't great. I have a lot to say about this next book too. This one is a nonfiction book, and this was The Soul of an Octopus by Montgomery. I was really pumped for this book. Like, I was really, really excited. So the full title of this book is The Soul of an Octopus, A Surprising Exploration into the Wonder of Consciousness. Basically, I thought that I was getting into like a nitty-gritty sciencey book explaining consciousness, like with a very large proportion of the book like being neuroscience-y and psychology-y, and I just didn't get that. And that was really frustrating. Like, from that title, let me know in the comments below, would you expect a book that was very neuroscience-based? Because that's what I got from the title. Reading the back of the book, it basically explains that the book is about the author meeting a whole bunch of different octopuses and exploring their personalities and that sort of thing, which is what you get in the book. But from the title, saying that, you know, it's an exploration into the wonder of consciousness, I feel like that is kind of where my expectation versus reality really differed. And it was basically a series of anecdotes of the author meeting these octopuses and talking about their different personalities, which, don't get me wrong, it was really cute sometimes and really interesting sometimes, but it wasn't what I had expected based on the title. If I had just read the back of the book, then my expectations would have been exactly what this book is. I don't know what it is. I'm so hung up on the title because I was just so excited for a book that really went into a lot of neuroscience and psychology stuff, and I just didn't get that. Overall, I ended up giving this book a 2.5 out of 5 stars, and honestly, I think that this book could have been a 3.5 out of 5 if I thought that it was what it was. Like, if I went into the book expecting what I got, I think I would have enjoyed it for what it is, but because I expected something so different based on the title, I don't know, I was frustrated. Maybe that's just on me. I'm gonna go and find more octopus consciousness books though. Anyways, moving on. Okay, so basically after the disappointment that was The Soul of an Octopus for me, I decided to pick up something that I knew I would enjoy and something that was really short, and that was the third book in the Wayward Children series by Shenk McGuire. That is Beneath the Sugar Sky. I've heard that for a lot of people this is their least favorite out of the now 5 books that are out in the series, and I don't really know how I feel about it. I've only read up till the 3rd one. Don't get me wrong, I loved this book. I can see why this one is the lesser favorite, at least compared to the first 2 that I've read. Basically, if you don't know, the Wayward Children series of books is a series that follows kids who end up at Eleanor West's home for wayward children, which is basically a place where the kids that end up going to different worlds go when they come home from their worlds. This book was definitely a little bit less involved than the other books, and I felt a little bit of a disconnect between me and the characters. Like, I didn't care about them as much as I would have liked to, or as much as I have cared about characters in the past. So I think this book definitely does struggle a tiny bit with that connection. Although I would have liked there to be a little bit more of that connection with the characters. I read these books because I love the quirky, fantastical nature, and I love Shenk McGuire's writing. That's why I read these books. So I still really enjoyed it, and I highly recommend this series still. And overall, I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars. So after that, I decided that I would once again pick up an audiobook, this time of a short fantasy book. If you've been on my channel before, you've probably heard me talk about the Circle of Magic series by Tamora Pierce. And there is another series that is a follow-up series to that series that basically follows the same 4 main characters as in the Circle of Magic series. This second series, the second quartet, is called The Circle Opens, and the book that I listened to on audiobook was the first book in that second series. Basically, in this book, we follow Sandry as she's a little bit older than she was in the previous series, and she's taking on a student who she's going to help teach magic. She's about 14 at this point. Basically, she eventually trains him to help her take down a murderous group of people who have been wreaking havoc in the kingdom. That's the gist of the plot for this book. It's a very simple plot, but again, I don't necessarily read these books for the incredible plot or anything like that. These books, I really like the simple writing, and I really like the very distinctive characters. I enjoyed the book, and I will be continuing the quartet, and I ended up giving this book 4.5 out of 5 stars. So the next book is the lowest rated book that I've read so far this year, and before I get too far into it, I just want to kind of give a little bit of a content warning. This book does involve mention of like sickness and biohazards and flu and that sort of thing, so if that's something you're not super comfortable listening to, given the world's current state right now, I totally understand, and you can just skip ahead to the last book that I've read, and then I'll be talking about in this video at the time that's on the screen. The 9th book that I read so far this year was No Safety in Numbers by Dayna Lorentz. This is marketed as a teen, like YA type book. It's a survival type situation where basically you're following 4 teenagers who get stuck in a mall after the mall gets put down on quarantine because somebody planted some kind of biohazardous bomb in the ventilation system. And it was kind of trash. I feel really mean saying that, but this book was terrible. Like, it was weird because it was a book that was marketed as a teen YA book with subject matter that really shouldn't be consumed by anyone younger than like maybe 12 or 13. All I said in my notes was that it felt like it was written for a 7-year-old. You basically had your inciting incident where they found this biohazardous material in the ventilation system, and then you had a few events of like things getting worse and worse in the mall. Like, there was no direction, there was no mention of like who actually did it. Like, the story's point wasn't like, let's find out who did this. It was just you're like a fly on the wall. It wasn't well thought out. There wasn't a clear direction to it. And so as a reader, I found it really hard to get invested. Overall, I did not like this book. I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. The only reason it doesn't have 1 out of 5 stars is because I wasn't actively dreading reading it. So the last book that I'm going to talk about today was an autobiography, and this was My Brief History by Stephen Hawking. Stephen Hawking is somebody who I have always really been inspired by. I think it's pretty amazing that even in the face of extreme adversity, he always kind of continued forward and continued contributing to the scientific community, and quite frankly, I really like his sense of humor in his writing. This is an extremely short book. It was about 126 pages, I believe, and I listened to it on audiobook, so it was very, very quick. Basically, it's an autobiography. He explains his life and experiences from childhood into the height of his career, and it was really interesting. If you're interested in picking that one up, I highly recommend it, and I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. So basically 2020 has been a huge whirlwind of a year so far, and I know that reading has really helped me in getting through a lot of what's going on in the world right now. I hope that maybe some of these books that I've talked about today have piqued your interest and can help you through this crazy, intense time in the world as well. I hope all of you guys are doing well. I hope you're all safe and happy and healthy. And I want to just take a minute and thank anybody who is out there working through this for doing their jobs. It's extremely appreciated, and I can't imagine having to be out there kind of on the front lines of this. So if you are in any way working through this and you're out there on the front lines, I just want to say thank you. Anyways, guys, that is everything for today. If you want to see more videos like this, definitely hit the subscribe button. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button. That really helps me out. And as always, drop a comment down below if you have anything to say about any of the books that I mentioned here, or if you have any recommendations for me based on what I liked or disliked in this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I sincerely hope to see you next time. Stay safe, guys. Bye.